It's TEDA time.
Living in Terrebonne, living in Terrebonne. You sure won't want to miss it, and I'll bet that you'll revisit living in Terrebonne.
Local Terrebonne Parish economic news.
Hello, and welcome to this edition of TEDA Time. I'm your host, Keith Weissite, licensed clinical social worker with Terrebonne Home Care. Very glad you're joining us. However you may be joining us, we appreciate it. And very glad to have back with us Cohen B. Guidry with TEDA. Welcome back.
Thank you, sir. Good to be here.
We appreciate that. And sitting next to him, the great Pulaski. And so, Chris, we're glad that you're here.
Thank you both for having me here.
All right, there you go. I appreciate that. So we're talking about names, and it's just really interesting that, you know, for a long, long time, the M wasn't a part of my name, and it became part of it. Forever, yours has got to be the middle initial, and Chris is simply Pulaski.
Right. Yeah, it's not a, I mean, it's a common Cajun name, of course, but.
Oh, exactly. Everybody.
Polish Cajun.
Yeah, everybody
Polish
knows.
Cajun. Yeah.
Everybody knows Pulaski like everybody knew Spicoli. And so we'll age some of our guests, which is really fine. But we appreciate y'all being here for TEDA Time. Any updates happening? TEDA, the really good things and good work that you guys are doing? Anything we need to?
We are. We're working on some good partnership programs with Pulaski and his group and the parish.
Yeah.
And jointly coming together on some stuff. So, you know, I jokingly say usually the first week in January to everybody, all right, guys, Christmas will be here in 3 weeks. And let's look at it. This year has just flown by. Lots of things have happened, have transpired. I mean, from the federal to the state to the local level with changes and things that are coming our way. And I think there's a lot of good changes that are coming our way. You know, we probably won't get into what's going on at the state level, tax reform, but that could certainly affect the business we do every day.
Right.
And things. So we'll go on with that. But, you know, Chris and I work on a lot of programs together and, you know, both private-public type thing and just some things that fall outside of both of our realms of daily responsibilities. So we've established a great rapport and friendship, and I value that a lot. I wish everybody was that easy to work with.
Yeah, you know, both of you do that, and that's such a credit to both of you to be able to really create these partnerships and be able to kind of extrapolate, if you will. This is something private we can work on. This is something public we can work on. But ultimately, having a friend and colleague that you respect, that you can work with, it just makes those relationships so much easier. And quite frankly, it's all about the people in the community, about getting more services.
No, you're right. You're absolutely right. You know, because Chris is the type of guy, and it's helped me get that value added to my personality of how can I help? What do you need? I know you're working on something. Is there anything I can do to help you? And it's a natural fit.
Yeah, we've had several programs that y'all have just kind of mentioned that very thing and like, oh, by the way, we've got this, and that's how that's come up, right, Chris?
Right. A lot of communities, the economic development and the planning office are sometimes one and the same. I mean, you know, when Cohen is approached by businesses looking to locate in our area, perhaps they're in need of a property or entitlements to a property. Perhaps it has to be subdivided, or maybe the zoning needs some sort of special approval. So things start, that's usually the first, you know, cooperation there. And then, of course, building permits, things like that. So, you know, we try and work together on helping people find out how they can start a business, how they can locate in Terrebonne Parish, make it easy for them.
Right. We certainly want to do that. Can we talk a little bit about the small business grant program that's happening?
So in Terrebonne Parish, there have been and are several small business loan programs, you know, whether it was in the past, TEDA, South Central Planning has had one for a long time. But this one is specific to our Community Development Block Grant Disaster Recovery money, which is a mouthful, CDBG-DR money. It's IDA recovery money. So this is HUD money. So HUD allocated $117.6 million to Terrebonne Parish from that IDA recovery funds through the Community Development Block Grant Disaster Recovery. Those funds are administered by the state of Louisiana's Office of Community Development.
All right, OCD.
So OCD. So the parish and all the other parishes who were allocated money developed a list of projects. We had 26.
Okay.
Terrebonne was allocated the most
Right.
out of all the parishes. We were hit the hardest.
Right.
So we had 26 projects, and I know we're going to be talking about several of them today. And one of them is a small business loan, or small business grant. I'm sorry.
Right,
It is
right.
not a loan.
Right.
It's a grant.
Yeah, big difference.
Well, yeah, big difference, right? This is what the fine print, though, is like all of the DR projects, because they're HUD funded, they have to meet the national objective. They have to serve or benefit low to moderate income or disadvantaged communities. So in the terms of a small business grant program, the applicant has to fit into that, has to be eligible. They either have to be low to moderate income, or, disadvantaged community, or in the case of a business, the owner of the business has to be. So
Right.
where, that isn't specific. I mean, we have other projects that we've submitted that some of them are infrastructure, like we're going to go out and build something, pump station or what have you. In some instances, those are located in those LMI disadvantaged community areas, but in some cases, they may actually be located outside, but the area that it benefits, like if you think
Who's it
about a
gonna
drainage, think about drainage infrastructure, okay, well, what area is being drained? So
Right,
as long
to do
as
that.
it
Right.
meets those qualifications. And that's what we're doing now is we have to, all 26 projects, we have to, well, we had submitted a preliminary review or preliminary application back in January, but we have a deadline at the end of November for the rest.
Well, Chris, we appreciate it. We're going to pick right back up there. So TEDA will continue with us. Do that as well. Come right back as we talk with Cohen and Chris about advantages in our community. We'll be right back.
It's TEDA time.
Tune in to HTV10 for some TEDA time. On this show, you will learn what's going on in Terrebonne Parish with Cohen B. Guidry and all of his special guests that he brings along.
Local Terrebonne Parish economic news.
Hello and welcome back to this edition of TEDA Time. Very glad to have with us Cohen and Chris talking about some of the advantages that we have through TEDA with the parish and some of the projects that are going on. Chris, bring us back up to speed, if you don't mind, about the application process for this small business grant program.
Sure. So as I was saying, the DR projects, the final applications are due back to the state at the end of November, and OCD has told us that they want to turn those around and give us the green light on these projects as quickly as they can. And they're hoping to do it for most of them by the end of this year, by the end of 2024.
Oh my
and we've
goodness.
already gotten some of those approvals back.
Wow.
Especially for the planning efforts and things
Right,
like that.
right.
But with respect to the small business grant, we've got about $5 million allocated for that program.
Okay.
But that's not something that the parish is able to administer
Okay.
locally. And that's where partnerships come into play. We talk about that a lot.
Sure.
So on the case of the small business grant, the partnership is with both TEDA and South Central Planning. So South Central Planning, as I mentioned before, has an ongoing small business loan program. So this would be somewhat similar, except that this is a grant.
Right.
But also TEDA is brought in on that too, so that TEDA can help steer people to this program, but also give them the tools and the knowledge on how to succeed with that business, right?
Right.
So that's where that partnership comes in.
Okay.
In addition to the small business grant, another one that we have that's in line is a small business incubator.
Right.
So what is that? Okay, well, that gives an opportunity for people to have office space, share space for their office or business. They share conference rooms. They share copiers. So they share physical space that they're in, but also sharing that space offers up communication, and they can share ideas and help each other grow. They can hive brain decisions. That too is something that TEDA would be helping with.
And partnerships that get developed through that. Go ahead.
Right. So in our new facility at the Whitney Bank building, we've got about half of the third floor with our suite, a joint conference room, and the Fletcher Small Business, Terrebonne Parish Small Business Incubator will be adjoining that around the side. So, and like Chris was mentioning, we will be it'll be kind of coming in at baby steps until they're ready to take the training wheels off, but they're not big enough to get into their own office and things like that. And we'll do that through bringing in guest speakers, bringing in business owners, giving them tips, and just giving them a lot of information that they can pick from and pick people's brains, and kind of a continuing education. They might need it for 6 months. They might need it for 2 years.
Right.
And just so Fletcher's going to run the curriculum for it and run the program, and Terrebonne Parish will provide the space for them to do it and the money to build it out, but Fletcher will kind of run it with our assistance.
And that's similar or indicative of all of these programs and projects. Like the DR funds will pay for the infrastructure, they'll pay for construction, renovations. In the case of the incubator, it's finishing out the interior of an existing office space. But those funds can't be used for the programs. That's why the partnerships are so vital. So that's where Fletcher and TEDA come in.
Right, and we've talked with Fletcher. They've given description about that, exactly what their plan is for it. Yeah. And it's exciting because it's going to help these young, and we have people all the time that come on that either have a new business or want a new business, but not quite sure how to get going, right? How to get started, how do I prevent that overhead? And like you said, they get to pick and choose how that's going to work.
Well, they don't know what they don't know. So and many businesses come into the parish in different ways. Some go to Chris's office first and say, hey, I'm just going to rent a building and I need to get a permit, or I'm going to build this place. And so we steer to one another. Why don't you go talk with this group first? And we've got it lined out for, do you have a tax ID number? Have you registered with the state? Have you formed an LLC? And we just give them that checklist and we set them up for success, versus they've been in business for a year and they don't have the right stuff, and then all of a sudden they're worried about penalties or fines from Department of Revenue or things like that. So we give them the right tools. Now, some people still choose not to use the right tools, but we try to give them a fighting chance from right off the starting line.
Right.
And both of those projects are near and dear to Jason's heart. Parish President Bergeron, and if you hear him talk, he often will speak about small businesses and how he supports that, how he himself, grew his business from, his home to, what he's got now. And so he's very supportive of these projects as well as some of the other projects that we have.
Yeah, and it's one of those things when, a good point, you don't know what you don't know, but for Jason and what he's been able to do and be open-minded to, well, how can we prevent other people from maybe not falling into a pitfall like this? And education's so very important.
And it's free.
It's not just about new businesses, too. It's also about existing businesses. So some of the projects that we have will, go a long way to benefit a lot of the existing businesses and properties that we have, not just downtown, but in the city of Houma and, of course, outside the city and in some of the other areas of the parish.
And that ties directly into one of our main tasks called BRE's Business Retention and Expansion. We don't only look after new businesses that want to come in. We have to take care of the existing ones. And we try to meet with every business at least once every 3 years. And when I came, we were doing about 60 businesses a year. We're up to 80 now. And just finding out, what do you need? What are the shortfalls? And it really helps the existing ones.
How we help. I like it. Speaking of help, we're going to continue to help, talking about what we can do for our community through TEDA and through the parish. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back here on TEDA Time.
It's TEDA time.
Tune in to HTV10 for some Tea Time. On this show, you will learn what's going on in Terrebonne Parish with Cohen B. Guidry and all of his special guests that he brings along.
Local Terrebonne Parish economic news.
Hello and welcome back to this edition of TEDA Time. Again, your host, Keith Weissite. Thank you for joining us, joined by Cohen and Chris, talking about all these wonderful programs. And you were talking a little bit about some of these programs and how they affect different areas. Let's talk a little bit about the stuff downtown.
So I mentioned, grants and incubators that are focused on new businesses and things like that. But we also have projects that will help existing businesses. So one of those is a facade program. So the parish... the Houma Downtown Development Corporation has a facade grant program that they've had for years, and the Houma Restoration District has a facade program grant that they've had for the last couple of years. This one is within a certain area. We have $3 million allocated to it, and it would be eligible for any commercial business along Main Street from St. Charles Street to Howard Avenue. Then from Howard Avenue to East Tunnel, then East Tunnel to West Tunnel, and then West Tunnel back around to St. Charles Street back to Main, right? So that
loop.
big loop. So properties and businesses along those corridors, not within that,
Right.
but on those corridors, right?
Right.
And of course, as I mentioned before, they have to be eligible to meet the national objectives. So we're talking about low to moderate income, disadvantaged communities. Mm-hmm. So it wouldn't necessarily be available to every business. Applebee's would not get this grant.
Right. Gotcha.
But the idea is it can be used. Basically, we're looking at a maximum of $50,000 per grant application. So $3 million, that's roughly 60 properties. Some may not get the full 50, we'll see. But it can be used to make improvements to the building facade, renovate the exterior paint, new signs, but it can also be used to make improvements to the property. So if they want to do improvements to their parking lot, make it a little more attractive. So if I'm, the owner of a multi-tenant commercial building, I could do that, right? My tenants could also apply for a grant to improve the facade of the unit that they're
themselves
renting, right? So
fences, right? Fences, they got knocked down.
Landscaping,
We've not been able to do anything about
all those things to make it more competitive, more attractive, to help that business thrive.
Wow.
That's our facade program. And then we have downtown, the Main Street corridor. We've talked about our master plan and proposed streetscape improvements, and that's basically what this would be the start of. For the moment, we've got $3 million allocated to that from the DR money. And we're talking about looking at, from St. Charles Street, to Howard, and improvements along that corridor. And those would chiefly be, sidewalk improvements, improving the pedestrian, the walkability, safety, crosswalks. But, when you get into those sorts of projects, $3 million goes pretty quick.
Yes.
So one of the things that we're looking at doing is finding other sources of funds that we can apply to this as well. And we're looking at a grant that would provide as much as $10 million that we could then add to this. Now, we're just starting that notice just came out. So we're putting those applications together, and hopefully we're successful. One thing that the federal grantors like to see is other grant money being put in. They like it when you combine grants. You score better.
Sure. Well, we're showing that we need more than we have, but we're willing to work with other grant programs. And we'll do that. We'll bear part of that load. Let somebody else bear another part.
Well, and we're local government, so we'll stick to what we do best, which is the infrastructure and those kinds of things, and then we'll leave the private sector and organizations like TEDA to help with those improvements, and we'll have some partnerships there to help administer those facade grants and that kind of thing.
Right.
And then lastly, I'd mentioned we're looking at more than just downtown. I mean, the last item or project that I can think of that provides the most benefit to businesses outside of the downtown area is our support the seafood efforts, and that's a multi-phase. There's some in the first batch of projects. There's some more in the second. I think the total is about $6.5 million. I know Cohen's got information about that too and what's
Yeah.
going on there.
So one of the things that Parish President Bazeron, before he came into office, he was kind of heading up and helping with the Seafood Task Force.
Right.
So now that he's got a lot more responsibilities, kind of pitched it to us and asked if we would be interested in taking it over. And absolutely, it's a mainstay of this parish. I mean,
Yep.
it was one of the founding things that started this parish. So we're picking that back up and taking a slow, methodical approach. But we have a lot of good contribution through CTAG, Senator Fessie's office, Councilwoman Kim Chauvin. You know, everybody's working towards the local seafood should be a priority. Look, in the restaurants, and that's the thing, it starts with every individual. When you go to a restaurant and you go to order shrimp, ask the question, is this Louisiana seafood? Is this locally caught? And there's test kits out there that you can utilize.
There's a company that goes out to test
Yep.
those restaurants, and so
it's holding the standard where it needs to be, but it's in its infancy. So I think that we'll grow some steam with this
Right.
as we move forward.
right, and some accountability here with the national decision to be able to tax some of that seafood coming in from other places, which is really nice because we want to make sure that we're taking care of what we have here with our own
We got to
stuff.
take care of our own first.
We do. We do. Guys, thank you so very much. Great information today. And I know if people need any information, they can reach out to Cohen at TEDA, reach out to Chris at Parish Office. And thank you again for your time.
Thank you for having us.
All right. All right, guys, that'll do it for this particular edition of TEDA Time. But don't go anywhere. A lot more local programming right here on HTV.
Told you.